Shalom, shalom, peace to everybody, man. Hit that like button. You know how we rocking, man. Seven Gang, Source Gang, over everything. We back at it, man. We here. We here. We here to put Israel on the atlas, and that's what we do, bruh. What we do here is special because we actually teach and we elucidate topics. You know, a lot of these other guys are in it for, other reasons because they got a gripe or they're into it with, particular individuals in a certain ideology. We actually try to build methodology and perform proper methodology and build our cases here on the source. So today I want to deal with the genetic table of nations because I've seen other people attempt to, reconstruct the table of nations, and I look at it and I'm like, man, that doesn't really comport with, history or, archaeology, demography, and our genomic data. So with no further ado, we're going to get into this presentation and actually break down where we come from, why we map out and plot out the three children of Ham, I mean not Ham, but three children of Noah, and show you what the conclusion I have came to through my studies. Because we use historical records, demography, and stuff of that nature, and the legend of the Israelites, and what Josephus, a Jewish historian, wrote down about where these ancient people would be at. For instance, Japhet, we mentioned yesterday, would be the CF lineages. Why? Because he says that they are the first ones to go to Europe. The first people in Europe would have been FM89 lineages. So we know what male line they go back to. So all the lines that are related to FM89 are Japhet. So that's how we map out the ancient societies, who they went back to as far as the biblical framework provides, with Noah's three sons, Ham, Shem, and Japhet. Now, if you don't believe in the Bible, then hey, this video is not for you. But these are for people that follow the biblical narrative and believe that it is a true reflection of human history. And that's how I analyze the Bible, as a true reflection of human history. You could say it's mythos, but myth always encapsulates reality. So from there, let's get into the presentation. I'm not going to hold y'all up too long. As the scriptures say, a wise man adds to a sentence, and that's what we try to do here at The Source. All the naysayers and the people across the aisle, on the other side of the aisle, they do a terrible job at demonstrating. And demonstration always beats conversation. Remember that. So let's get into it. The genetic table of nations, a biblical phylogeny. Before we get in, I want to make some key points. This model is not built on the social constructs known as modern race theory, meaning black is its own race and white is its own race. Phenotype does not determine ancestry. It's not the sole determiner of ancestry. So we're not using that in our model. That's a very flawed way of looking at people groups. And to establish that, at one point, the whole world was brown. The whole world had melanin, So that's something to be noted. We're not using, Blumenbach's racial caste system. So this is from a paper, How a Genetic Mutation Led to the White Race. Nadra Karim Niddle Thought Code is where you can find the source. Published July the 4th. I believe that's 2020. No, 2020. It says, imagine a world where everyone had brown skin. Tens of thousands of years ago, that was the case, says scientists at Pennsylvania State University. So how did white people get here? The answer lies in that tricky component of evolution known as a genetic mutation. And that's exactly what happened. A genetic mutation happened, and that's when you start getting lighter skin tones. But initially, the earth would have been all brown. Noah would have been brown. His children would have been brown. Let's keep going. So we also want to point out another pertinent fact here is that all humans went through a bottleneck. I'm going to establish this with the source. Turns out all of humanity is related to a single couple. Maurice Delato, published November 24th, 2018. Says our communal mom and dad got together after a catastrophic event almost wiped out the human race. The Daily Mail reported of this study. So, coming from a biblical framework, we'll say that catastrophic event would be the flood, the worldwide flood. And I'm not saying a local flood. That's just silly, because we can see that we have tons of dead things, dead organisms, and sedimentary rocks across the planet. It's pretty much ubiquitous across the planet. And one could argue that that reflects a global catastrophic event. And we can even see through the genomes that there was a catastrophic event that pretty much wiped out almost all the humans. majority of the animals. Right here it says the researchers studied the DNA of 5 million animals, including humans, to come to their conclusions. They also found that every 9 out of 10 animals come from the same original creatures. So there was a point of time where almost all life was destroyed on the planet Earth, and a bottleneck event, which was ubiquitous across the Earth, took place to repopulate the Earth. And we can argue that this event is what the biblical narrative is explaining with the flood. All right, so let's go to Bodhi Hodge's work. Bodhi Hodge, his work, Tower of Babel, page number 173 and 174. And I just want to get the point about Japheth's descendants, Shem's descendants of Africa, and the Hamites as well. It's really nuanced when you think about it. So we're going to get right to it. It says Japheth's descendants went north toward Europe and Asia. So when we're trying to determine who Japheth is, and they are the ones who settled Europe, we need to go to Europe and examine the fossils that we find there and what was the genome that was sequenced there. Ham went towards Africa. So according to this, we'll have to look into early Paleo-African people groups and try to examine the DNA there as well. It says, and Shem remained in the Middle East, moving into the surrounding areas in the east. Of course, there were exceptions to this. Recall, for example, Ham's descendants through Cush, Nimrod, who remained in the land of Shinar. Also, some of Japheth's descendants remained in the Middle East. Madai, whose descendants became known as the Medes, were often associated with the Elamites, otherwise known as the Persians. And that's critical, too, because we know what those populations were. A lot of them have J, a lot of them have G. They would fall under the Japhite category, not the Semite. It says some of Shem ended up in Africa, and we're going to touch on this later on in today's episode and breaking down why is that so. All right, so why do we argue for these things? It's based off empirical data and not just mumbo jumbo like some of our opponents like to do. So some of Shem ended up in Africa. We're going to touch on that later. But just to get a general idea where these people groups would have went according to the legend. Sons of Noah, these are the clans of Noah's sons according to their lines of descent within their nations. From these nations spread out over the earth after the flood. So Genesis 10:23, like I brought out earlier, scientists are saying that a catastrophic event pretty much bottlenecked not only humans, but majority of animals on the planet Earth. And according to the Bible, after this bottleneck, the sons of Noah had to repopulate the earth. Now, can we articulate ourselves scientifically about 3 branches of humanity being responsible for all of humanity? Yes, we can. Nathaniel Jensen actually did this, which is a master geneticist. It says, when research biologist Dr. Nathaniel Jensen plotted hundreds of human mitochondrial DNA sequences onto a tree diagram, the project revealed an obvious pattern. The mtDNA stemmed from 3 central trunks or nodes instead of just one. 3 trends in Jensen's data suggest that the wives of Noah, sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth best explain this. So again, we could see 3 lines of descent for all major people groups when it's plotted out on a phylogenetic tree. Jensen's data show that the human mtDNA tree has 3 nodes. Thus, everyone alive today carries one of the 3 unique ancestral maternal sequences. This fits Genesis' claim that all humans who exist today descended from one of the wives of Noah's sons. Source: DNA Trends Confirm Noah's Family by Brian Thomas, PhD, ICR.org is where you can find that information. And here's a diagram of that exact map that we were just reading about. The 3 nodes that connect all human populations. You can see the 3 green arrows are the nodes that connect all the human populations. And if you go all the way out here, these are your sun people and stuff like that. They have a according to Daniel Jensen, that they have deeper mutation sequences because they mutate at a quicker rate than other human groups. That's why you see the branch stretching all the way out. So it's important how you interpret the data. Triad structure of humans. Even on the paternal side of things with the Y chromosome, we can still see a triad structure, three branch structure, three node structure of humans. And this is how we do it here at the source. We say AB is Ham, DE is Shem, and CF represents Japhet. Nathaniel Jensen also says the same thing. But of course, he doesn't plot it out the way we plot it out. But in principle, it's the same. So applying these considerations to the Y chromosome tree in figure S3 of Carmen et al., I observed that the Y chromosome tree possessed a type of triad structure near the junction of the haplogroup C lineages with haplogroup A, B, D, E lineages, and with the haplogroup F through T lineages. However, because of Noah's advanced age, 500 years, at the begetting of his sons, he may have contributed an unusual number of mutations to his three boys. For example, see Carter 2019. Thus, I define the epsilon root more in terms of the positions of the three boys than in terms of the position of Noah. So the epsilon root of all humans, all males, he's saying represents the triad structure, or the three boys, Ham, Shem, and Japhet. Again, this is a geneticist saying this, Nathaniel Jensen. The source is testing the predictions of the young Earth Y chromosome molecular clock, Nathaniel Jensen's AnswersResearchJournal.org, published in 2019. So you can see that we have a scientific argument for what we say here and how we group ancient peoples. Let's keep going. Now, let's start with Ham. The children of Ham possessed the land from Syria and Amanus. So we know Hamites were present in the Middle East. No one's denying that. But how do we differentiate them from the other groups that were present in the Middle East? I'm going to show you. In the mountains of Libanus, seizing upon all that was on its seacoast, and as far as the ocean, and keeping it as their own. Some indeed of its names are utterly vanished away. Others of them being changed, and another sound given them are hardly to be discovered. Yet a few there are which have kept their denominations entire. For of the four sons of Ham, time has not at all hurt the name of Cush. For the Ethiopians, over whom he reigned, are even at this day, both by themselves and by all men in Asia, called Cushites. So what we're going to do to determine who are the Hamites, we're going to find out who are the Cushites, and then figure out what the DNA is. And that's from Josephus' Antiquities of the Jews, Book 1, Chapter 6. So what is the paternal DNA of the Cushites? Let's deal with the DNA of Sudan to determine that. The area known today as Sudan may have been the scene of pivotal human evolutionary events, both as a corridor for ancient and modern migrations, as well as the venue of crucial past cultural evolution. Several questions pertaining to the pattern of succession of the different groups in early Sudan have been raised. To shed light on these aspects, ancient DNA and present DNA collections were made and studied using Y chromosome markers for ancient DNA and Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA markers for present DNA. Bone samples from different skeletal elements of burial sites from Neolithic, Meroitic, post-Meroitic, and Christian periods in Sudan were collected from Sudan National Museum. So again, they're taking the skeletal remains and exhuming them and sequencing the genomes to determine what people were there. All right. Remember, we're trying to figure out who would be the Cushites, who would have dwelt in Sudan, right? So, source, genetic patterns of Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA variation with implications to the peopling of the Sudan, Ibrahim Muntazer. Remember, Josephus stated that one of the sons during his time that could still be remembered was Cush, the Ethiopians, or the Ethiopians on whom they reigned. So we're going to figure out who these Cushites were, according to DNA. Kushite source populations to generate Y chromosome specific haplogroups AM13, BM60, FM89, and Y and YAP markers, which define the deep ancestral haplotypes in the phylogenetic tree of Y chromosomes, were used. Whenever you see the word YAP, that's dealing with the DE, haplogroup DE and its descendants. It says haplogroups AM13 was found at high frequencies among Neolithic samples. So who are the first people we find in the Sudan or i.e. Kush? Haplogroup AM13. Who would they represent according to Josephus? The Kushites. These would be Kush. So we have a source population to determine and elucidate the ancestry of Ham. So we know who the Hamites would be. You guys are following. Would be haplogroup A. And the relatives of haplogroup A would be B. YAP markers are not related to A and B groups, which is DE. Because a lot of people try to make DE Ham just because they're black and they live in Africa. And we're going to show why that's flawed. Because we see a particular group, haplogroup A. What does haplogroup mean? If you've been watching the channel, haplogroup means a group of individuals that share a male common ancestor when we're dealing with the Y paternal. So we're not related to haplogroup AM13. We're a separate cluster. We're our own distinct group. When I say I'm primarily just talking about African Americans and majority of West Africans, right? Because majority of us will fall under the E family, not the A family. So when we're looking for a Kushite source population, haplogroup AM13 was found at high frequencies among the Neolithic samples. They were the first ones. Haplogroups FM89, like J, R, stuff of that nature, I, you don't see that in Sudan until later. It says, and YAP appeared to be more frequent among the Meroitic, post-Meroitic, and Christian periods. So that's when you start seeing a lot of FM89 and DE lineages coming into the Sudan. You see it later, not before. The initial population would have had haplogroup A. And the source is genetic patterns of Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA variation with implications to the peopling of the Sudan, Ibrahim Muntaser et al. At the University of Khartoum. Haplogroup A and Kush, again, to reiterate that point, analysis of DNA samples from burial sites in northern Sudan, pre-Kerma, support a predominance of Y haplogroup A during the Mesolithic, the Middle Stone. Again, Ibrahim Muntaser. His book, Genetic African Populations, page 46. So we know that northern Sudan would have been Kush because we have the documentation to prove it. This is from the Oxford Handbook of Ancient Nubia, page number 183 to 184, the first empire of Kush in the second intermediate period. In the last half of the 17th century BCE, Kush expanded its control beyond its homeland in the northern Dongola reach as far as the Second Cataract to encompass the Nile Valley from at least the head of the Fourth Cataract to Elephantine, and its strong influence at least was felt as far as the Horn of Africa. This was the first empire of Kush, the largest political entity in Africa at the time. What will be the DNA of the original settlers of Kush or the pre-Kerma population? Haplogroup A. All right. It says the data and mechanics reconsolidation in Kush are unknown, but it seems to have occurred by the middle of the 17th century or about the time that the Hyksos rule in Egypt began in its earnest. It paralleled the change from Middle Kerma to Kerma Classic archaeologically, or the phase of Tumulus, Imperial Kush, and rulers buried in KXVI, KXK, and so forth, lasted from circa 1650 to about 1550 BC. So we can see that the kingdom of Kush was a real entity, and we know the DNA there. It says elsewhere, a nomarch of Beni Hassan said that he followed his lord when he sailed southward of Kush. This is documentation let you know Kush was a real entity. You have certain people out there, and they say, well, Kush is just made up. No, it's not. We have documentation, we have stelae, we have writings showing you that Kush was a real thing. Let's jump here. It said it was Senuseret III that that a monumentous change took place in Nubia and in Egypt. We know only the Egyptian side, Senseret erected a colossal string of fortresses from Sarah East, Pharos in the north, and Simna south, circa 1850 BC. He also repeatedly campaigned against Kush, now named as the principal objective in his second Simna Stele. There is an inverted explanation. So we can clearly see that in Egyptian records that Kush was an entity. Said that this crisis occurred on two fronts, Nubia and Western Asia, and it was accompanied by an oppressive social reorganization that opened the door for larger crises to come in the first empire of Kush. All right. And again, that's the same source, the Oxford Handbook of Ancient Nubia. Very expensive book, but a very good book if you want to get the details of Nubia. All right, so let's deal with Hamites in sub-Saharan Africa. A lot of people think that we were in West Africa. When I say we, I'm talking about the E family, haplogroup E. There's no proof, no evidence for that, no ancient DNA, just people's postulations. But when we look at the ancient DNA in sub-Saharan Africa, the Paleo-Africans, it's clear who was there. So this is a paper by David Reich and others. Ancient West African foragers in the context of African population history. When we were dealing with ancient West African foragers, these are those A and B groups, haplogroup A and B, not E. We're not included in that conversation. It says our knowledge of ancient human population structure in sub-Saharan Africa, particularly prior to the event of food production, remains limited. Here we report genome-wide DNA data from 4 children, 2 of whom were buried approximately 8,000 years ago and 2 3,000 years ago from Shumlaka, Cameroon, one of the earliest known archaeological sites within the probable homeland of the Bantu language group. One individual carried the deeply divergent Y chromosome haplogroup A00, which today is found almost exclusively in the same region. However, the genome-wide ancestry profiles of all 4 individuals are most similar to those of present-day hunter-gatherers from Western Central Africa, and which implies the population in Western Cameroon today, as well as speakers of Bantu languages from across the continent, are not descended substantially from the population represented by these 4 people. This is what we've been telling you guys for years. The Bantu population primarily are not of these Paleo-African lineages. These Paleo-African lineages would be the Hamites, just like we presented earlier, AM13 representing the ancient Kushites, which Josephus said that that's pretty much the source population determining who Ham would be. Then we can clearly see and elucidate the ancestry of Ham. These will be Hamites. We have nothing to do with them as far as lineage and ancestry. We came much later, as we can see in this article. It says, these people are not descended substantially from the population represented by these 4 people. We infer an African-wide phylogeny that features widespread admixture and 3 prominent radiations, including one that gave rise to at least 4 major lineages deep in the history of modern humans. And one of those radiations that came into Africa dealt with the Bantus, where we came in and reduced the autochthonous indigenous peoples that lived in sub-Saharan Africa. But before then, they were replete in sub-Saharan Africa. And here's the haplogroups from the paper, the 4 haplogroups. Haplogroup B, A00, and B2B. And the 4th one was a woman, so they only have her mitochondrial, which was L1. That was the female. So we can clearly see the original sub-Saharan Africans would be A and B. And like I stated before, Kush would have been A. So this is how we plot them under the Hamite categorization and people group. Khoisan Eurasian admixture. Plotting them as Hamites would also explain why we find Eurasian admixture amongst Khoisan. Many people say, well, they got it from East Africans or, people that migrated down and gave it to them. But our explanation is that they were originally in Eurasian localities, just like the Bible says, and they were mixing with the people groups there. And then they recently got pushed down into sub-Saharan Africa during the Bantu expansion. All right, so this paper's researchers find signs of Western Eurasian genes in Southern African Khoisan tribes. When this first broke, like this was like big news because people thought that these people were just isolated and had no contact with anybody for eons. The paper says the Khoisan tribes people of today still live much as their ancestors did. They are hunter-gatherers who are also pastoralists. And that's why I want to point out, remember what we just read about the ancient West foragers, the West African foragers. So anytime you see ancient West African foragers, then that's talking about Hamites, not Shemites, which would be the DE group. It says they are hunter-gatherers who are also pastoralists. They are most familiar to Westerners as people who speak with distinctive clicking noises. Until now, they were believed to have the purest African gene pool due to their thousands of years of isolationist practices. The team acquired DNA samples from 32 people living in Khoisan tribes in southern Africa, and analysis revealed Eurasian gene segments in all of them. But that wasn't the end of the story. To understand how the gene fragments got into the Khoisan tribes people, the researchers turned to the archaeological and linguistic evidence to build possible timeline of events. And so, in so doing, they found what they believed to have been a migration back into Africa by people of the Middle East, ancestors of the people that migrated to Europe and Asia approximately 3,000 years ago. Those people made their way to various parts of the continent, including a part Eastern Africa, from which the Khoisan tribes people had migrated south approximately 900 to 1,800 years ago. So these people would have had these Eurasian genes. They posit their form of retelling of history. And if the Bible be true, the narrative be true, then we can just say that these Hamites were, in close proximity to other Eurasians anyway in times past, and they picked up these genes, and then they were recently pushed down south by, you guessed it, the Bantus. The researchers found something else. The Khoisan tribes people also had snippets of Neanderthal DNA in their genes as well, courtesy of their Eurasian heritage. Haplogroup A amongst modern Cretes. This is from Ancestral DNA, Human Origins and Migrations by Rain J. Harea, page number 469 470. Skeletal osteology of fossils in the region suggests that Aegean Bronze Age of Greece consisted of a very morphologically homogeneous population. However, genetic evidence from extant populations using Y chromosome analysis has revealed a high degree of heterogeneity within the island of Crete when examining haplogroups A, D, E, G2, I, J, and P. So they did find in the extant populations, people that live there now, haplogroup A. And the funny thing about it is you find haplogroup A as well in Britain. You find haplogroup A in Britain. All right, so we're moving on to Ham. We concluded with Ham. Ham would fall under the A and B haplogroups. That should be clear and concise now, based on the model that we presented and Nathaniel Jeanson pointing out the triad structure of humans. All humans would go back to 3 nodes, 3 trunks, 3 branches, which we are calling Ham, Shem, and Japheth. We're overlaying it with the biblical framework. So let's deal with Japheth. This is Josephus' Antiquities of the Jews, Book 1, Chapter 6. It says, now they were the grandchildren of Noah, in honor of whom names were imposed on the nations by those that first seized upon them. Japheth, the son of Noah, had 7 sons. They inhabited so that beginning at the mountains Taurus and Amanus, they proceeding along Asia as far as the river Tanis, and along Europe to Cadiz, and settling themselves on the lands which they light upon, which none had inhabited before. They called the nations by their own names. So we can see that these Japhites would be the first ones to inhabit Europe. Of course, they inhabited parts of Asia as well, but we can differentiate them from others by examining the European lineages. Lineages of ancient Europe. Y chromosome DNA can tell us something about the dispersal of men in Europe. It is thought that Cro-Magnon's Y chromosomal haplogroups belong to C, F, and I. The analysis of Y chromosomal DNA from Neolithic Anatolia, Iran, Israel, Jordan, and various Neolithic cultures in Europe, Greece, Hungary, Croatia, Germany, Italy, France, and Spain indicated that all sites except those from the Levant had a majority of the haplogroup G2A individuals. So except those from the Levant is huge because initially there were no FM89 lineages in the Levant. G2A appears to be the dominant Neolithic male lineage of the Near East, with the only apparent absent G2A in southern Caucasus region. FI1 and I2 were also found with I2 lineages found among early farmers in Siberia and southern France. Interestingly, the haplotype relationship between the Basque and the Sardinians, I2A1A, indicate they share a common Neolithic ancestor. So all of these groups that were in ancient Europe descend back to an ancient group of males that came from FN89. These will be your Japhites, according to what? To what Josephus said, that these will be the first ones to settle themselves in Europe. And we can see the early people of France, Italy, Germany, we know who they are. They come from haplogroup F. That will be HIJG, all of them. So when the Jews with J markers claim to be Shem, no, they're actually Japhetic. And that's when you overlay the history, the demography, and the genetics together. You only share one common male ancestor, and that's going to be FM89 or the CF lineages. You're not Shem. We also know that through Javan, right? Back to Josephus, same book. Now as to Javan and Madai, the sons of Japhet, from Madai came the Madaeans, who are called the Medes by the Greeks. But from Javan, Ionia, and all the Grecians are derived. So the ancient Greeks would have had those FM89 lineages as well. Let's deal with the lineages of Japhet. So the FM89 population represents the main out of Africa migration of our species. Descendants populations of FM89 group terminate in the following mutations. So when we deal with the Balkans, that's haplogroup I. The Sardinians are haplogroup I. The Central Europeans are haplogroup I. What did we just read in Josephus? That the first ones to inhabit Europe would be the children of Japhet. The Scandinavian I group, the Near Eastern J group, JM172, that would be related to haplogroup FM89. And we're treating FM89 as Japhet. And all of his descendants, as you see here, would be Japhet. Bottom line. The Caucasus has the G group, the Baltic N group, Western European R group, Eastern European R group. All of these haplogroups would come from FM89, and the source for that is Germanic origins from the perspective of the Y chromosome by Michael Robert St. Clair, Berkeley, spring 2012. Now, we can also see that the descendants of haplogroup F would also fit the biblical verse or blessing, if you will, in Genesis 9:27, where it says, God enlarges Japhet. He shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be their servant. Well, when we examine DNA haplogroup F, it has been enlarged. Matter of fact, the F lineages represent 90% of the world's population. DNA haplogroup F is the parent of all Y DNA haplogroups G through T and contains more than 90% of the world's population. You can find the information in the article Y DNA haplogroup F and its subclades 2018 and isogg.org. So at this point, it's clear who Japhet is. So that's why we plot all of the early Europeans, haplogroup J as well, because they try to, use some trickery and say that that's Shem, but they will all share the same fathers as the early Europeans, which according to Josephus would be the Japhites. They all come from DNA haplogroup F. And they make up 90% of the world's population. That includes the Chinese. Chinese have a huge population, which primarily haplogroup O, which descends from haplogroup F. Now, last but not least, let's deal with Shem and plotting out the genetic table of nations. Shem's progeny. Same book, Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews, book 1, chapter 6. Shem, the third son of Noah, had 5 sons who inhabited the land that began at Euphrates and reached to the Indian Ocean. For Elam left behind him the Elamites, the ancestors of the Persians. Asher lived in the city of Nineveh and named his subjects Assyrians, who became the most fortunate nation beyond others. Arphaxad named the Arphaxidites, who are now called Chaldeans. Aram had the Aramites, which the Greeks called Syrians, as Lod founded at the Lodites, which are now called Lydians. Of the four sons of Aram, Uz founded the Trachonitis in Damascus. The country lies between Palestine and Sile, Syria. Ul founded Armenia and guided the Bactrians. In Messa, the Messenians, it is called Charax Spasini. So we can see that the Shemites will be in the Middle Eastern area, Syria. Some will be in Armenia. Some will be around this region. Euphrates, Fertile Crescent. All right. Also, the name of Africa comes from Shem according to legend. This is Josephus' Antiquity of the Jews, Book 1, Chapter 15. It said it is related of this Ophir that he made war against Libya and took it, and that the grandchildren, when they inhabited it, called it from his name, Africa. So when we're dealing with Afir or Africa or the Afar tribe, there's a legend that these people will be Shem according to Josephus. Let's keep going. Now, to elucidate the ancestry of the Shemites, we're going to use the Natufians because some of the oldest populations that we find in the area. They are responsible for the Neolithic Revolution, sowing the seeds of civilization, introducing the world to agriculture, bringing in Afro-Asiatic languages, which would be a Shemite character. That would be a Shemite character trait. You would expect the early Shemites to bring forth Afro-Asiatic languages. They've been called the Proto-Semites. They have been called the Proto-Afro-Asiatics, the Natufians. We know their land allotment. From 14,000 years ago, centered between the Jordan Valley and the Mediterranean coast, are the groups now known as Natufians, with similar sites further north in Syria. We just read that the Shemites will be in these localities, and we find the Natufians. We know the Natufians' DNA. They would have haplogroup E. And this is Chris Gosson's Prehistory, a very short introduction, page number 52, Oxford. The Natufian period, the Dictionary of the Old Testament states the Natufian period 10,000 to 8,300 BC, which may have been centered in coastal Syria and Palestine, is also evidenced along the middle Euphrates region of Syria at Dipsi Farah. Now here El Homer, Abu Hurayya in Muraybit in Eski Mosul Dam region. So we know that we're in Syria. We know they we're in the Euphrates. We just read where these Shemites will be. Let's go back. Let's go back right here. Shem, the third son of Noah, had 5 sons who inhabit the lands that began at Euphrates and reached the Indian Ocean. We just read that. And they will be in Syria, Palestine, and Damascus. This is how we're matching this up. You see that? Natufians in the middle Euphrates region of Syria. That's how we match it up. These people have haplogroup E. Now, Natufians carried E markers, E1B1 and E1B1B, and they were located within Sile, Syria, which is where we expect to find ancient Shemites. And here's a map to articulate that or demonstrate that better. These are Natufian sites, Natufian demography. All right. The Natufians also been called or postulated to be Shem, or the progenitors of the Israelites. It says there's evidence that some 7,000 or 8,000 years ago, a black Negroid race inhabited Palestine. Sir Arthur goes on to say that these early Palestinian blacks may have been the ancestors of the Semites or Arabs of biblical times. Other markings found on these skeletons seem to indicate the early black Palestinians had a connection with ancient Ur of the Chaldees. This is all Shemitic. These E markers have a connection to Shemitic culture, Afro-Asiatic languages, farming. So this is how we make the claim. Introduction to African Civilizations of the book, page number 24. Aramasa Kubo has the same model. He believes that DE would be Shem as well. While chromosome DNA haplogroup DE, the Middle East, and you see D becoming the Japanese, 40% of Japanese in the Chiang. So D spread East Asia and into Japan. Haplogroup E is also found amongst the Ashkenazi, Sephardim, and the Levites of Samaria, tribes of Israel, West Asia. Aramasa Kubo, DNA of the ancient native Israelites, he says, above is what is current the Jewish DNA is, then what was the haplogroup of the ancient native Israelites. It seems that their native DNA was haplogroup DE or E, which has YAP gene sequence, the genetic relative of the Japanese haplogroup D. We can know it, seeing that the Samaritan Levite priests belong to haplogroup E, as already mentioned. Furthermore, every Jewish group in the world has haplogroup E prominently. At a website of a DNA test provider, the family tree DNA is written about the specific type E1B1B1, which belongs to haplogroup E as follows. E1B1B1 is found in all Jewish populations from Ashkenazi, Sephardic, Kurdish, Yemen, Samaritan, and even among the Jajerba Jewish groups. Thus, haplogroup E is found in all Jewish populations prominently. Furthermore, as haplogroup E and D, YAP gene sequence is found not only in current Jewish population, but also in descendants of the so-called 10 lost tribes of Israel. The Parthians in Afghanistan and Pakistan, who are said to be descendants of lost tribes of Israel, have haplogroup E remarkably. The Uzbekistan Jews, who are also said to be from lost tribes, have haplogroup E at the rate of 28%. The Falasha Ethiopian Jews have haplogroup E at 50%, and the Igbo Jews in Nigeria have haplogroup E at 90%. Haplogroup E is thus found among those who are said to be from the lost tribes of Israel. The lost tribes of Israel have haplogroup D also. The Chiang people, southwest China near Tibet, whose faces resemble Japanese ones, belong to D at high rate of 23%, having YAP gene sequence. According to Amishav, the top of which was late Rabbi Eliyahu, who had written the tribes of Israel, the Chiang people have many traditional Israelite customs and are descendants of the lost tribes of Israel. Thus, it is a YAP gene sequence that connects all the current Jewish populations, as well as the Samaritan Levite priests, descendant of the lost tribes of Israel and the Japanese. We can say that nearly 40% of the Japanese who have haplogroup D in YAP would be descendants of ancient Israelites and relatives of Jews. So Aramasa Kubo's take is not too far from our take. He's plotting DE as Shem. So let's deal with some information on haplogroup D and E. The migration history of haplogroup DM174 is most mysterious. By the time we have known little about the origin and dispersal of this haplogroup was derived from African haplogroup DM1 YAP insertion and is associated with a short black Asian physical style. Haplogroup E and D are brother haplogroups. While haplogroup E was carried westward to Africa by the tall black people, haplogroup D might have carried eastward to East Asia by the short black people. Haplogroup DM174 has high frequencies in the Andaman, Negritos, and northern Tibeto-Burman populations and the Ainu of Japan, and also appears as low frequencies in other East and Southeast Asian and Central Asian populations. In northern Tibeto-Burman population, the Baima D comprises nearly 100% of haplogroup D. Haplogroup D1N15 is prevalent in the Tibetans, the Chiang, the Lolo, and also found at very low frequencies among the mainland East Asian populations. Languages and Genes in Northwestern China by Dan Shu, page 23. And we're going to end it off here with page 24. It says, most of the population with haplogroup D have very dark skin color, including the Annamese, some of Tibeto-Burman, and among Khmer people, the Ainu people may have changed the pale skin to absorb more ultraviolet light in high latitude region. For the origin of haplogroup D, suggested that CTM168 gave rise to YAP insertion and DM174 mutation in South Asia, based on their findings of YAP insertion in the Northeast Indian tribes and DM174 and Andaman Islanders. In that case, haplogroup E with YAP insertion might also have an Asian origin. And that's what we argue for. We know there's a an argument against it that says it's African, but it's all postulation, it's all parsimonious, and the best we can do is line up the evidence and may the best man win. All right, so same source, page 24. Haplogroup D also have an Asian source. It says genome-wide data. Also, not a haplogroup D. This is E1B1B. This is talking about EM78 in North Africa. Just if anybody points that out. Genome-wide data also suggests that North Africa was recolonized in the Pleistocene from a Southwest Asian source with a similar time frame for the indigenous North African lineages. So when we see EM78 coming in through the Ibero-Maurusians, which would be E1B1B, these will be Shemites from Southwest Asia. We can make that argument. Same source, Africa from the MIS 62, page number 377, says the Ibero-Maurusians in the Maghreb dates to 22,000 years ago and overlies a nondescript MSA flake industry from which it is separated by a sterile layer of several thousand years, in which itself overlies the Aterian. The patterns of with U6 and perhaps also M1 implies that modern humans who made the MSA industries were not the ancestors of those who made the Ibero-Maurusian, but rather that these autochthonous North African lineages spread from further east, most likely from the makers of the diamond industry with an ultimately Southwest Asian ancestry. So these people with E markers, the Ibero-Maurusians, which we know they have E markers, would originally came from Southwest Asia. And the book is Africa from the MIS 6-2, page number 377. Haplogroup D, according to the wiki, the YAP insertion was discovered by scientists led by Michael Hammer of the University of Arizona. Between 1997 and 1998, Hammer published 3 articles relating to the origins of haplogroup DE. These articles state that YAP insertion originated in Asia. As recently as 2007, some studies such as Chandrasekhar et al. 2007 cite the publication by Hammer when arguing for an Asian origin of the YAP insertion. So we can actually argue that DE, our parent haplogroup, came from Asia itself. And haplogroup D. Haplogroup D is an Asian haplogroup predominant in Southeast Asia, including Siberia and Central Asia. I just bought this book, by the way, $209. But it's worth it because I like to be ahead in the genetic game. The book is called Genomic Diversity of People in India, page number 198, 199. So we can see haplogroup D having an Asian source as well, pointing back to these Shemites that lived during this time. BMAC culture, I brought this out before. We do see E1B1A and E1B1B in the Bronze Age BMAC. All right, the Oshu civilization spanned the area of modern southern Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan between 2400 and 1800 BC. Based on the genetic analysis of the remains found in the civilization cemeteries, there were a number of ethnic groups living in the area, including Middle Easterners, Ancestral J, J1 and J2. These would be your Japhetic groups, Indo-Europeans, R1B, R2, more Japhites, Caucasian, G&T, Japhites, Dravidians, Japhites, and East Africans, E1B1A, E1B1B, found in South Asia as well. All right, for the summation of the genetic table of nations, the entire human species bottlenecked in times past and branched out into 3 distinct groupings of human beings. Remember, we brought up what Nathaniel Jeanson brought out about the 3 nodes that connects all humans together, and the triad structure of Y chromosomes. We are calling that triad structure Ham, Shem, and Japhet. And we're labeling Ham as A and B haplogroups. We're labeling Shem as D and E. And we're labeling Japhet C, F lineages, because we can see that Japhet would have been the first Europeans. We use the biblical framework to map out these 3 distinct groups. Using the historical documents and matching it with ancient DNA, we are able to elucidate ancestry. The first Europeans would be Japhites, making all of the descendants of CF Japhet. The Paleo-Africans would be Ham, making all of the A and B lineages descendants of Ham. The early Levantine groups, Natufians, would represent Shem, making all of the DE descendants of Shem. And that's the end of the presentation. Short, concise, sweet. Hope you guys got it. So now, a brother try to come on the channel and say, I don't understand that. I don't understand this. How do you break down the genetics, the beginning, or how people were formed? Just refer them to the video Genetic Tables of Nations. All right, any questions? Does anybody have any questions for what was stated tonight? Someone's telling me look in the chat. I was looking at the PowerPoint the entire time. Anybody have any questions? Anybody regarding the show tonight? I'm looking at the chat. I don't see any questions. Hopefully this was insightful and give you guys some more study material and back into things we say. Let me see. Second answer to this says biblical leprosy wasn't limited to just Hebrews. Other people kept their albinos, create more melanin deficient people. Well, the thing about leprosy can also inflect if you're talking about vitiligo, right? If you're talking about vitiligo, then vitiligo can be it's a genetic disease, and European males and women and females can get vitiligo because they still have melanin. They just have a low expression of it. And you can actually see that the white blotches on their skin and where the melanin is actually being deteriorated. So, yeah. Vitiligo is not specific just to people with high pigmentation. Mongolia, Magog, and Kittim, China, descendants of Japhet, also Aramaic. I agree. Chinese would be descendant of Japhet because they come from FM89 lineages, meaning all of them have to be related. You can't parse them out and say, well, this person's Shem. No, they all share the same father. So you have to trace it all. You have to say one or the other. You can't just, make it your own thing, or try to parse them out. They have to have the same male if you're looking at the Y chromosome. China descends from Japhet's Ham. Nikki Lane says legends are a lie. I guess that's what you're saying. I mean, that's your perspective. I don't look at legends as pure fiction, especially if there's historical reality that can reconcile it. Second answer says, yeah, I can see that. Real Hebrew is like 777. China descends from Japhet and Ham. I don't know about all that. I know they come from Japhet for the most part. The paternal DNA of Cush is Cush AM13. We brought that out. They would be haplogroup A. Shalom, Elkam, Barlow, peace. Yes, brother saying shalom. Don't know what you're talking about there. D should also incorporate those Melanesians and Polynesians. Some of the haplogroup D are, Negritos, so, but largely they're Japhet because they're CF lineages. Khoisan and Pygmy haplogroup A, yes, they will be Ham. Haplogroup D comes from the Middle East. Yes, I agree. Nikki Lane's telling everybody her mitochondrial DNA, L1. Shalom. Ramal Yahoo says, shalom, I'll go up there when he's done and build. I think you are the type of Israelite he can vibe with. I don't know what you're talking about, Nikki Lane. I'm looking in the chat. I see Nikki Lane making comments, but someone says my DNA is E154. Do we have any particular idea what branch Shem Pacific Islanders? Nazarene says, do we have any particular idea what branch of Shem is in the Pacific Islands, Papua New Guinea and so on are from? Yeah, the Negritos that have haplogroup D, they will be Shemites according to our model. Rashun Washington says, we know according to Jubilees, Canaan came to the Levant near the Chalcolithic and Bronze Age. Why do you think is Canaan? Or who do you think is Canaan, since he should descend from haplogroup A and B? To get specific, I can't really point out who he is specifically or what they were specifically as far as a modern people group, but I do know, like you said, they would be haplogroup A and B. How do you, Bama Thoroughbred says, how do you keep up with different clades of different haplogroups? I mean, you just have to study. I mean, you're just going to have to study, try to follow the scientific literature as they update every year. This is forever changing with new information being available to the geneticists. So you just have to keep up with it. Shalom, brother. Yahia Davis, I believe China is part of Gog and Magog. Nazarene, I haven't thought of that. I haven't thought about, assigning them an exact son. I just look at the principle of them being Shem. So you said if a lot of Pacific Islanders are haplogroup D, what branch of Shem do you speculate them to be? It's a good question. I don't go that, when it comes to the specifics, I don't go that deep into that. Rashad Washington said, Genesis 49ers, we know, according to, I read this already. Bama Thoroughbred says, once they break away from A, B, D, E, C, F, it gets confusing. What do you mean? He said, I should do a detailed study of YD and E1A. Many of us from transatlantic slave trade have it. Maybe sometime in the future. I'll try to elucidate it and break it down and see what people groups, or maybe Ivry could do it. My brother Ivry, he's big on the genetics as well. I just give you guys the rudimentary concepts so you guys can understand why we plotted out into 3 different nodes and 3 branches of humanity, which would be A, B, D, E, and C, F. Says someone, Robert Jarvis Jr. says someone from Ancestors and Genesis who was referred to in your haplogroup J video. You mean Nathaniel Jensen? We referred to him before. I referred to him today. Yeah, I referred to him today. Nathaniel Jensen. He's a geneticist. I like his work. I don't agree with everything he says. I don't agree with a 6,000-year timeline. But like I said, the empirical data is the empirical data. If he's seeing 3 branches in humanity, I mean, there's no way around that. Anybody else have any questions about today's topic? Anybody? I can't stress enough for anybody that's new to the channel, haplogroup means a group of people that share a common ancestor. So CF, if it's Japhet, it means all of his lineages would descend from Japhet. It's a male line. AB, if that's Ham, then all of his lineage will descend from Ham. DE, if it's Shem, all of its lineage would have to descend from Shem. When I use a tree, I understand better, but just saying EM35, I'm lost. Yeah, he does say that. He says the professor Jensen he says that haplogroup T will make a better fit for Israelites than haplogroup J. Well, I disagree with him on that, but he's actually right. If you're going to argue FM89 lineage, it should not be J. It should be T, because there's enough evidence for them being in the Pecking Cave. They were there in the Middle East. They argue that they originated there. That'll be way better than that. what else did you say? Sorry that the professor in JBL says T and L are Israel. He knows that T is the most widespread. What have you come across on that to consider those haplogroups at Japhet? Well, it goes back to the argument that I made earlier. They're still descendants of FM89. And Josephus says the first people to settle Europe would be Japhetic. So T would be related to G, I, and all the rest of the groups that were in Europe, putting them under that male common ancestor, which would be Japhet. That's how I argue that. I brought that out in the presentation, by the way. So are you going to put the link in? I could put the link in, but I'm not going to argue with you guys all night, I'll tell you that. I want to do this video because people said, pretty much people wanted to know the foundation argument. And I was like, well, might as well just cover the genetic tables of nations and how we come to the conclusion and how we cement our foundation on this argument. So the link's there. If anybody wants to join in, maybe go for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And then I'm closing this down. Any more questions? We have groups from Q and R claiming to be Canaanites. It's impossible for them to be Canaanites. Again, remember what I just said. If you're FM89, if you're descendant of FM89, that's one male line. You can't be Japhet and Ham. You have to pick one. Which one? And through our model, like I said, through what Josephus said, the first people to inhabit Europe would be FM89 lineages. That will make them Japhite. So Q and R would be Japhite, not Canaan. What's going on, Avery?
Hey, shalom. Good presentation.
Yeah, man. I try.
I'm by the way, I'm completely done with the haplogroup J videos. Now I'm just doing the bonus content. I'm working on that right now.
Okay. When did you want to air again?
We can do it Sunday night. Just got the new internet, so I should be good. And by the way, as you can tell, I'm online right now, 10 o'clock at night. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody in the audience, if you guys want to have a further dialogue, download the Clubhouse app, and I guess I'll parlay with you guys
by
over
the way,
there.
Everyone in the chat, never use Windstream as your company, and spread the word. 12 years of terrible internet, money wasted. But anyways, going back to the subject at hand. But yeah, I'm pretty much got through my haplogroup J videos. I meant slides. I'm gonna have to, of course, put down all the pictures for part 3, because like I told you earlier, it got deleted, so I have to redo all that. But that wouldn't take long. I always screenshot my slides, and so they're my photos in my phone, because I do my presentations on my phone. But yeah, I'm down and I'm ready. And when it comes to my bonus content, I'm working on part 1, and with my notes, I'll be done with I should be done with part 1 tonight if I just keep grinding at it. And then I'm going to do a part 2. And then really for my bonus content, it'll be about like 3 episodes. I'm at 4 episodes for bonus content. And the bonus is pretty important. And then I'll be done on the show, because I got to, of course, work on my own channel and work with Divine and Orthodox more.
Right. And I'm going to do everything in my power to drive traffic towards your channel. But
thanks,
yeah, Divine Prospect, he has a bigger audience to me, so you'll have a lot of reach on his channel as well.
Yeah, and I'll come back to your channel too, by the way. When I'm done with my channel, his channel, and Orthodox, I'm going to come back here and give my thesis on, if you want, give my thesis on how we can connect ourselves to the Israelites genetically, anciently, and how Israel possibly could have looked anciently. Because
Yeah,
I kind of don't like us saying that Israel was black or we're the descendants of the Israelites without like how can we connect ourselves to these people? And I'm going to do that through a genetic way, going as far back as the Exodus. I have a whole presentation already laid out on how we can do that.
yeah. I mean, that's going to be great, and that's what separates the boys from the men, so to speak, because what we're doing here is pivotal because we're not just making the statement. We're giving empirical evidence to back our claims and showing how the models work, where are we getting the information from, we're sourcing it. And I mean, it's a very beautiful thing to be a part of and witness, man. So, like I said, whenever you're ready, just let me know, and we can have that aired on the channel as well. Sunday, everybody look out for Sunday. He's going to do a follow-up, a continuation of the haplogroup J breakdown. So you guys don't want to miss that this Sunday. You said around 10 or 9 your time?
9:30 or 10 Central Standard Time. Yeah. You know how it is for me.
Yeah. So we're
around
gonna
9
give
or
you guys
10.
a window. Give you guys a good window. Like I said, 9 to 10. Anything you want to add or commentary on today's topic, the genetic table of nations?
Everything was a good layout when it comes to the model of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Again, I love Nathaniel Jensen's model, and I like your model as well about the 3 nodes and all humans basically descending from these 3 ancient nodes that will branch off into the modern ethnic groups of today. It makes the most sense. You can use this for an old Earth or a young Earth, So I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, man. If my brother Abu, if he watching, he tried to make Noah haplogroup J.
Who?
This brother named Abu something. I forgot his whole
You're breaking
name.
up, by the way.
Oh, you can't hear me? Can you hear me?
Can you,
Oh man, Ivry, you got the new internet service, brother.
all right, I hear
on,
you
man.
now.
Yeah, the brother name was Abu something. I don't know the rest of his name, but he left a very lengthy comment on my
I
channel.
don't know what's going on. Hold on.
I talked to you. I talked to
Are
you
you
on
speaking
Clubhouse.
right now, or
Yeah,
let
I
me see
am
what chat
speaking.
has to say. Hold on, let me
I
see
can
what
hear
chat
you
has to say.
clearly. They can hear you too.
Oh my gosh. Well, it is nighttime, so there are a lot of people online. Oh, I hear you now, though. So keep going. We can go back to what you were saying, or start at the beginning.
Okay, so brother Abu left a comment on my channel, and he basically claimed that Noah would have haplogroup J. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense because Noah and his 3 sons are supposed to repopulate the earth. That would mean everybody would have to be downstream or ancestors of haplogroup J. Did you hear me? All right, Avery, I'm gonna reach out to him in Clubhouse. Anyway, that doesn't make any sense for the audience listening, and this is why our model is better suited, and pretty much efficient as far as describing who's who in the biblical context and what DNA they would have. Ham having AB, Shem having DE, and Japhet having CF, and becoming all of the F lineages because the early Europeans would descend from F lineages. If you guys have any more questions, I'll give you 30 seconds to a minute, and then I'm going to close down the live.
I'll meet you on Clubhouse because I caught half of that conversation. I think my computer's kind of overheated. I've been using it all day. I need to start using my phone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, brother.
All right. Yeah. I kind of caught what you said about someone said that Noah is haplogroup J, correct?
Yes. Yeah, we'll talk about it on Clubhouse.
Okay. Yeah, my, you know how it is in tech. You know how it is in where we live. I'm not gonna say where we live, but you know how it is. I think it's just nighttime, and that's why.
No, but you're clear though. You're clear.
Bit.
Like
I got it today. I got the internet today, so it's still, still kind of, I guess, working its way through the house.
Yeah. Nikki Lane says they all have the same dad. How would they all have a different haplogroup? Well, I explained this in the beginning of the present.
Oh, my bad. I'm leaving. I'm just gonna.
All right, brother. I'm gonna catch you on Clubhouse.
Let me just get on out of here. I'll meet you at Clubhouse, though.
All right. Yeah. So I answered this in the presentation, and I'll just answer this last one before I close and make my way over to the Clubhouse. If you have a Clubhouse, you can just follow me, Yashub Izakar, on Clubhouse. Real quick, let me open up the PowerPoint again, and I'll just read it one more time, and then if you don't get it, then you can rewatch the video from the beginning, and hopefully that will, resolve any confusion that you may have. All right, so let me go straight to the slide and not waste any time on this. I believe it's the slide about the triad structure of humans right here. It says, applying these considerations to the Y chromosome tree in figure S3 of Carmen et al. I observed that Y chromosome tree possessed a type of triad structure near the junction of the haplogroup C lineage with A, B, E, D, E lineages with the haplogroup F through T lineages. However, because of Noah's advanced age, 500 years, at the begetting of his sons, he may have contributed an unusual number of mutations to his 3 boys. Thus, I define the epsilon root more in terms of the positions of the 3 boys than in terms of the position of Noah. So basically, Noah would have the proto haplotype that produced the 3 boys, and the 3 boys would, which is that triad structure of humans, would later divulge into the 3 major haplogroups, A, B, D, E, and the CF lineages. If you don't understand that, go back and watch it from the beginning where I actually break that down more thoroughly. Nikki. Oh, well, you got to go back and watch it. It's better to watch it from the beginning to the end because I build up to it and I add, different parts and pieces that make the picture more vivid and more clear and more plain for you. All right, with that, I'm going to close out. Shalom. Source Gang, 7 Gang over everything. You know how we rocking, man. Let's get it. Hey, shalom, y'all. Be on the lookout Sunday, Avery, Haplogroup J, Part 2. You dig? 7 gang, Source Gang over everything. You know how we rocking, man. 7 candlesticks up. We've been telling y'all it ain't a debate. It's a stick up. Gang.